The South African Communist Party once again resolves to go it alone in elections. But do they mean it this time? And Thabo Mbeki is back with a bang, or is it a whimper? Well, very good morning to you and a warm welcome. The Polit Bureau is now in session. I'm Polit Mgambi. Now remember, your participation is important to us, so do send us your video comments via WhatsApp, the number 082-884-6370, or you can chat to us on Twitter at ENCA. Now to discuss the SACP, I'm joined by Aubrey Majikwi, a political analyst, and Dr. Dale McKinley. He's a former South African Communist Party provincial leader. But first, this is what the party's General Secretary, Blade Nzimande, said about the relationship between the SACP and the ANC.
While the alliance remains strategic, the manner in which it functions, you have said, as this Congress, is clearly outdated. The alliance's mode of operation is incapable of holding together the alliance any further. If the modus operandi of the alliance does not change, the alliance will inevitably disintegrate with serious consequences. Comrades, we have also resolved that we want to go and engage our alliance partners on all our resolutions of this Congress. And we wish to declare as the SACP that we want to engage as equals, not as an extension of any of our allied formations.
All right, let's get into it. Gentlemen, thank you very much for availing yourselves. Dale, let me start with you. How is this resolution any different from the one that was taken back in 2007?
It's not really. In practical terms, if you read in between the fine lines of this resolution, it basically says, yeah, look, we want to contest elections, but we're going to talk to the ANC, we're going to talk to COSATU, we're going to let this augmented central committee decide, and then sometime in the future we might get there. I mean, it's not very much different. In fact, the entire Congress for me, not just the resolution on elections, was like watching the same thing over and over and over again. If one goes back and looks at the resolutions of SACP Congresses over the last four Congresses, they're very, very similar. And the things that Blade Nzimande is saying and others are saying are very, very similar. So it's almost like the SACP is stuck in a perpetual cycle of moving around in the same space.
Mr. Majik, Dale is sounding, he's not very optimistic, to put it mildly. Why would you want to go and engage the alliance partners if this decision is final? You've just listened to Blade Nzimande.
Well, Polit, in order to understand what is happening, you need to go back almost 2 decades. In 1998, contradictions were very sharp between the SACP and the ANC. The difference between 1998 and 2017 is that in 1998, the contradictions were about the policy orientation of the post-apartheid state under the leadership of the ANC. And today, the responses of the SACP are guided by the factionalism inside the ANC. In fact, when the SACP was faced with the choice of either rising above factional battles in 2007 or transcending them to give direction to the ANC and the alliance as a whole, it chose to become part of a faction itself, the Zuma coalition. And so what you are seeing here are chickens coming home to roost. So this decision about contesting elections independently is not only old, but you must ask whether it is a strategic decision. Because it must be a decision guided, first of all, by where the SACP wants to go in relation to the goal of achieving a socialist order. Secondly, it can't limit itself to using the idea of contesting elections independently as a tactical move, as a threat to make the ANC comply with its demands. It must be a strategic decision about where the SACP is going beyond the factionalism of the ANC and the alliance.
Dale, talk to me about whether or not the leaders of the SACP were strong-armed into taking this resolution, because earlier in the week, in fact, it was just 2 days into proceedings, we'd already reported on this channel that the SACP had taken a decision that it would convene a special Congress next year in order to take a final call on whether or not they will indeed go it alone in the elections. That was clear, the message there, that we want to wait to see what was going to happen in the December conference of the ANC. So a question to you is, were the leaders of the SACP opposed to this in anticipation of that ANC Congress, or did they succumb to the delegates who had been chanting from day one that state power is what we want?
Well, the first thing I would say is that the leadership has never really wanted to contest. Aubrey mentioned 1998. I was in the Communist Party. I was in the provincial executive of Gauteng in 98. In fact, it was our grouping that unfortunately brought Bladen Zamande to become the General Secretary at the time. We had resolutions about breaking from the ANC in 1998 that were on the table in the Congress. They were buried by Jeremy Cronin, Bladen Zamande, and many others. Precisely because, if you remember, at the time, the vast majority of the Central Committee was in government, were ministers, their future was with the ANC. It wasn't with the Communist Party. In fact, 5 of the 6 officials of the SACP were full-time ministers or deputy ministers of the ANC. We only had 1 full-time person. So it's always been the case that the leadership has been quite separate, I think, a lot of times from the rank and file. They've wanted to have an insider policies, and the rank and file have wanted to have a very vibrant, I think, SACP that stands for itself, that stands for the working class, that takes socialism seriously. This is what many of us said 20 years ago. So this is a recurring what I'm saying. So yes, of course they've been pushed. They constantly are being pushed in that direction. And what is their solution? Their solution is, once again, what I call the Cronin-esque middle road. It's like, we won't do this, we won't do that, we'll follow it, we'll come back to you later. 5 years pass and nothing has happened. And this is the story of the SACP, is basically, it tries to be everything to everybody. It wants to be in the ANC, but it wants to be the vanguard of the working class. It wants to be taken seriously as a left force, but then it has ministers that implement neoliberal, capitalist, white monopoly capital policies, if you want to say. So it's a complete contradiction.
Aubrey, do you want to add something in there?
Well, in the end, what the SACP must ask itself about debates relating to going out of the alliance or contesting elections independently is whether the decisions they make take them closer to the goal of socialism or not. Not whether it makes them look better than the ANC. Because what was tragic to some extent about this Congress is that the SACP extolled the fact that it was more united than the ANC. In other words, the benchmark has become Jacob Zuma. The benchmark has become the factionalism, divisions and tensions within the ANC, and therefore an absence of that within the SACP is seen as a good sign. And the strategic conversation about what takes you closer to the goal of socialism, I think to some extent is absent.
All right, on that note, I want to actually link to another soundbite of an SACP leader, and this is basically linked to the question we're asking is the SACP hedging its bets in anticipation of that all-important ANC conference in December? Let's take a listen to Jeremy Cronin.
So what is going to happen in December 2017? The party has even been asking the question, is December 2017 going to happen? Okay. There are forces in high positions in the ANC, we saw it at the National Policy Conference as well, who are prepared to collapse provincial conferences, regional conferences, national policy conference commissions and so on, who are prepared if they don't get their way. Okay. And remember, some of them might be facing 783 criminal charges, plus I don't know how many thousands others, okay, since the last count was done. So we need to understand the dangers that we're facing as an alliance, as the ANC as well. Let us ensure, as the party, that we help the ANC to get in good order to its national conference. Very important. It's going to be a very important moment for the party, for the ANC, for the country.
Dale, they're hedging their bets, aren't they?
Hedging their bets, and you know, I've known Jeremy for 30 years almost, and as I said, there's a specific consistency to this politics. You know, if you listen to Jeremy in 2003 at the Congress, if you listened, they were saying the alliance is in danger. We are not being taken seriously. Remember, this is when Kasatu and the SACP were being called the ultra-left, and they were being called, I mean, Mandela and Thabo Mbeki went after them in the late 90s. So this is a constant back and forth, and the SACP's entire strategic trajectory that Aubrey's talking about has failed. What is their strategic trajectory? To be inside is to be best, because we can influence towards the second stage, which is socialism. We've got a first stage, now we're in NDR. They have fundamentally failed. In fact, we've gone backwards in the context of that, and the SACP has found itself completely compromised, and I think it's trying to wiggle its way out. And I have respect for some of the grassroots people who have been fighting real battles on the ground. But as far as the leadership is concerned, I'm afraid that we really do need a fundamental shift and a change.
Aubrey, if this decision were final, should the SACP not be saying, we're now going to actually engage our alliance partners on the modalities of how this alliance, if it is still going to be there, is going to work, with us obviously contesting the elections perhaps in 2019, if they so said? The question here is, they're not ready to leave this alliance, are they?
Well, firstly, there's a generational tension. What I call the struggle generation in the SACP, those of the age of Leighton Nzimande, Jeremy Cronin, and others, are psychologically married to the idea of the alliance as it was during a particular period, during the struggle. Ideologically, tactically, strategically, they may make noises that sound different from their psychological orientation and romantic orientation towards the alliance. Now, the younger generation does not suffer from that sense of romanticism. And that is why it is easy for them to conceive of a time when the SACP is either not in the alliance or is in a reconfigured alliance. And it seems to me the breakthrough will come once what I call the struggle generation in the SACP is out of the leadership of the SACP. But also we have come full circle. The SACP becomes part of a faction, the Zuma coalition, and it's partly because of that we have the problems they're complaining about today. Now then, they become part of this coalition because Jacob Zuma is not Thabo Mbeki. And they may be about to make the same mistake of going with Cyril Ramaphosa because he is not Jacob Zuma.
Dale, are they fighting a principled fight here, or, as Aubrey says, is this about factional battles? And so, therefore, given that we agree that they are hedging their bets, who then becomes the palatable leader for them in the ANC? Is it going to be Cyril? What happens if Cyril doesn't win? What happens if Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma wins?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, no, I don't think it's a particularly principled. I think it's a convenient shifting. The SACP is in big trouble ideologically. They are not taken seriously, I don't think, by a lot of people anymore, because they're seen as part, as Aubrey says, a part of this factionalism. I mean, let's be honest. The state capture that the SACP leadership and Blade are so against at the moment, they have been party to for the last 10 years, for the most part. They only started speaking out in the last couple of years when it became obvious that it had gone way beyond what they thought it would do. So I think it's in that context we must see that reality. Who is their most palatable candidate in the ANC? I really would say I don't think it really matters a great deal in the context of the SACP, but it would probably be Cyril. And the reason why I think it's Cyril is because they can relate to him to some degree because of his union background, because of the fact that he has some degree of, I think, sympathy for the SACP if you listen to his but once you get in power, you see things have become very different. And SACP has not learned this. They haven't learned the difference between how to transform power and how to access power.
All right, Dale, let's take a pause there. We continue our discussion after the break.